Ever since I got my hands on the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, I found myself using phone gimbals less and less. The Pocket 3's compact size and sheer convenience are just hard to beat. But when Hohem reached out to me to review their new flagship phone gimbal, the iSteady M7, I was genuinely interested in trying it out. It's a gimbal packed with interesting features that should excite smartphone shooters who prefer to film everything from their phone. One feature in particular caught my attention: the touchscreen remote control. In theory, this could solve one of the biggest frustrations of using a phone gimbal, trying to control and frame your shot when filming yourself from a distance. Could this finally be the solution we've been waiting for? I was eager to find out. In this review, I'll walk you through my experience using the remote control, along with my thoughts on other key aspects like gimbal performance, the magnetic AI tracker, and build quality. Now, I know this review is coming a bit late, especially since Insta360 released the Flow 2 Pro shortly after the M7's launch. While I haven't personally tested the Flow 2 Pro yet, I've done some research to help you compare the two, so if you're deciding between these two gimbals, I'll highlight where I think the M7 outdoes the Flow 2 Pro and when it might be the better choice for you. Let's start with the fundamentals. With all the bells and whistles modern gimbals come with, it's easy to forget that, at their core, they're still gimbals, and how they perform in that basic role is pretty important. One key difference with the iSteady M7 is its design. Unlike most phone gimbals on the market, which are foldable and prioritize portability, the M7 follows a traditional 3-axis gimbal design, and this gives it a noticeably larger footprint, but it also comes with some significant advantages. If you've ever used a bigger gimbal for mirrorless cameras, you'll know the kind of freedom of movement they offer. Foldable phone gimbals, on the other hand, often sacrifice some range of motion to stay compact. For example, my good old Insta360 Flow has a limited tilt range, which can make it tricky to maintain horizon lock in pan-follow mode. The Hohem iSteady M7, by comparison, has fewer motion restrictions and behaves more predictably when pulling off various gimbal moves. If you're used to working with mirrorless camera gimbals, this will feel like a natural extension of that experience. It also supports 360-degree panning and includes an automated 360-degree inception mode, which are features that are often missing from foldable gimbals. Now, the Insta360 Flow 2 Pro does introduce a new free tilt mode, but activating it involves a multi-step process, and while it's a nice addition, the extra friction makes it less practical for run-and-gun shooting scenarios. While the M7 doesn't score any points for portability, once it's out of the bag, the smooth, unrestricted gimbal movement it offers is pretty hard to beat. One fairly common issue with gimbals is that the gimbal arm can sometimes creep into the frame when you're using an ultra-wide-angle lens on your phone. It's frustrating and it can ruin an otherwise perfect shot. Fortunately, with my iPhone 15 Pro Max, I didn't run into this problem much, except in extreme tilting situations. But your phone may be different from mine, and if you ever do find yourself in a scenario where the gimbal arm sneaks into the frame, the Hohem iSteady M7 has a clever solution: ultra wide angle mode. This mode reconfigures the gimbal so that the arm moves behind the screen, keeping it out of view entirely. The trade-off is that it can slightly obstruct your phone screen's visibility, but it's a small price to pay for avoiding those annoying framing issues. It's a thoughtful feature that shows Hohem has really considered the real-world challenges of shooting with ultra-wide lenses. Now let's talk about one of the standout features of the iSteady M7, the dedicated magnetic AI tracker. This is something Hohem has pioneered and continues to push in their gimbal lineup. Unlike most gimbals that rely on their companion app for tracking, Hohem takes a completely different approach with this external tracker. So why use a separate AI tracker when other gimbals can track without one? The answer lies in its independence. This tracker works entirely on its own, separate from your recording device. That means you can use your phone's native camera app, or any third-party app for that matter, without being tied to the gimbal's companion app. This is a big deal for serious iPhone filmmakers who already have their own workflows. For example, if you're using the Blackmagic camera app to shoot an Apple log with full manual controls, you don't have to compromise by switching to the Gimbal's app just for tracking. But the benefits don't stop there. I've been able to use the M7's tracker to get tracking on my DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro, which is something app-based tracking gimbals simply can't do. And on top of all of this, it just works. As soon as the gimbal is turned on, the AI tracker is active, with no extra pairing steps or dealing with bloated gimbal software. Now let's compare this to Insta360's approach. With the Flow Pro and Flow 2 Pro, Insta360 introduced Apple DotKit compatibility, which theoretically allows tracking within third-party apps. But there are some limitations. First, it requires NFC pairing, which adds an extra step to the process. Second, the tracking itself is also a more basic, watered-down version compared to Insta360's Deep Track in their own app, which misses out on some of the fancier features and has a small additional lag. And all of this is understandable because Insta360 had to work around the constraints of the Apple DotKit API, which is a generic API for motorized stands designed with compatibility in mind. And of course, DotKit is exclusive to iPhones, so none of this means anything for Android users. By contrast, Hohem's AI tracker works across all devices and apps with no reliance on platform-specific APIs. Now, a question a lot of people will have is, how good is the tracking on the AI tracker? Since the tracker uses its own built-in camera, it doesn't have access to the high-resolution image data from your phone's camera. But honestly, I was impressed. It handled tracking very well, even in challenging conditions like dim lighting or when following smaller subjects. The improvement was noticeable over the MT2's tracker, which had a smaller sensor, and unlike the MT2, it isn't just limited to tracking humans. That said, because you can't draw the bounding box precisely like you can if you instead use the Hohem Joy app, I encountered cases where the tracking would be jerky or erratic compared to using the app. Other times I get lucky with the bounding box created by the AI tracker, which would result in much smoother tracking. And while a dedicated tracker has its advantages, it's worth noting that something like the Insta360 app offers a tighter integration with your phone, enabling more sophisticated tracking modes like active zoom and multi-person tracking. Oh, and I forgot to mention one more thing, which is the AI tracker also doubles as a fill light, offering both RGB and CCT modes. This is a nice addition for low light shooting situations or when you want to match the ambient lighting of a scene. You've already caught glimpses of the touchscreen in this video, but this is arguably the headline feature of the Hohem iSteady M7. Not only does it make selecting subjects for AI tracking intuitive, but it also provides a much more user-friendly way to control the gimbal and adjust settings on the fly. With this touchscreen, you can tweak gimbal settings directly without ever needing to pull out your phone. Want to set up a motion time-lapse? You can program waypoints right from the screen, completely independent of your phone. This is a huge advantage if you prefer using a dedicated time-lapse app that offers more manual control and lets you save JPEG or RAW files instead of just video. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The touchscreen is detachable from the main unit and acts as a full remote control for the gimbal. This is great for solo shooting, especially when filming yourself from a distance, which has always been one of the trickiest parts of working alone. With this remote, you can adjust framing, control the full light, hit the shutter button, and even recenter the gimbal, all without having to walk back and forth or pair additional devices. It's an improved overall experience that takes a lot of hassle out of solo shooting and makes the entire process a lot smoother. However, there are some things that stop it from being perfect. While the 1.4-inch touchscreen is useful for framing your shot, it's only displaying the feed from the magnetic AI tracker, not your phone's camera. This means that what you see isn't a one-to-one match with what your phone is actually recording. I've had times where everything looked fine on the OLED screen, but when I checked the footage, my iPhone was focusing on the background instead of my face. In most cases, my iPhone's autofocus didn't let me down, but it's a quirk worth noting if precision is critical for your shots. Also, the remote has no indicator to show whether the camera is recording or not. So even though the remote shutter button worked just fine, I sometimes wasn't sure if the camera was recording or not when I was using my phone's rear camera. Now that we've covered the iSteady M7's standout features, let's quickly go over some of the other general pros and cons of the gimbal. On the plus side, the build quality feels extremely solid, and it has a built-in extension pole, which is great for high and low angle shots without needing extra accessories. And while I haven't personally loaded my iPhone with lens attachments or other add-ons, the 500 gram maximum payload capacity is a big deal for those who plan to. If you're someone who likes to rig up your phone with additional gear, this is the gimbal for you. Moving on to the negatives, well, besides being one of the most expensive phone gimbals on the market, it's also just very big, and it wouldn't be my first pick for a travel gimbal. Foldable gimbals are popular for a reason. They're lightweight, portable, and great for casual shooting. If that's your style, you might want to consider one of those instead. The gimbal also has two detachable parts, the touchscreen and the AI tracker, meaning there is a real risk of losing them, which would leave you with a stripped down version of the gimbal. It's definitely something to be mindful of, especially if you're traveling or working in fast-paced environments. Overall, I think Hohem did a really solid job with the M7. Beyond just being a great gimbal that stabilizes handheld footage well, it comes packed with features that make life much easier for solo content creators who don't have a dedicated camera person. One of its biggest selling points is that it's the least app-dependent gimbal on the market. If you don't want to be locked into using a gimbal manufacturer's app, this is a big deal. It's great to have full control over the gimbal without constantly reaching for your phone. And because of this independence, it can even be a useful tool for other cameras like an action camera, which I definitely plan to experiment with more soon. That said, if you're fine using non-native apps, which are pretty usable these days, and you don't really see much value in features like the OLED touchscreen remote, greater freedom of movement, or the higher payload capacity, then the bulky design and higher price tag probably aren't worth it for you.